Yeah.
Thank you.
I've got one, yeah.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the April meeting of the Overall Scrutiny Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Paul Osborne. I'm the chairman of the committee. This evening is being held remotely, obviously, and is being live streamed via YouTube, and the recording of it will be available later on our website. Councillors and officers are reminded to put their mobile phones onto silent if they have one nearby, and to mute their microphones when not speaking, as this will reduce bandwidth and background noise and saves a prevention loss of connection. If you are a member of the committee, please leave your camera on. I will first do a roll call to check all committee members who are expected to attend are present. As I say your name, please turn on your microphone and confirm that you are connected. Councillor John Barnes.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Jimmy Carroll.
Hold on.
Thank you. Councillor Charles Clark.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Vicky Cook.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor. I've got Councillor Drayson here, but I'm sure he sent me an email. He's on a training course somewhere. Is that correct, Louise?
I've not heard from him actually, Chair.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll put him down as an apology.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Deirdre Earl Williams.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Sarah Errington. Councillor Errington. She was there earlier. Sure, she was there earlier. Councillor Polly Gray.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Madeley.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Carl Maynard.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Martin Mooney. Nope, must be delivering leaflets somewhere, I expect. Councillor Mooney, you there? No, maybe a turn up later. I've also invited Cabinet Portfolio holders along this evening. Councillor Field.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Dixon.
Present.
Thank you. I've just got a Teams. Councillor Sarah Errington is present. Thank you. Other members join this evening. Louise, have you got a list there?
I do, Chair. I've noted Councillor Curtis, Councillor Harmer, Councillor Stevens and Councillor Thomas. If there's anybody there that I've missed, could you pop your surname into the chat, please? Okie
dokie, thank you. Officers joining us this evening, I have apologies from Chief Executive Malcolm Johnson, who is elsewhere. Robin Venard is here. He will be taking any technical questions on from a Chief Executive position. Ben's here. I'm sure I'm seeing you in here, Ben. Yeah,
I'm here, Chair.
Yeah, cool. And Deborah Khalili, Head of Neighbourhood Services. Deborah, you're here?
Yes, present. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. And obviously Louise is here this evening. So that's good. Members of the committee will be making decisions today by named vote. Louise will call out each member in turn, and you can either vote for, against, or abstain. Members, please remember to turn on your microphone at this point and turn off again afterwards. Members who wish to speak, please indicate by typing your surname only into the chat facility. And don't forget that is persistent, so it can't be deleted, I understand. Please be aware there may be a time delay of around 5 seconds whilst a member appears on screen. Each item will be reintroduced as we get to it. So, first one. Minutes. Do I have your authorisation at some time in the future to sign the minutes of the Overall Scrutiny Committee meetings held on the 15th of March 2021 and the 12th of April 2021 as correct record of those proceedings?
Happy to move, Chair.
Thank you very much. And Councillor
Second.
Bray, I see. Oh, and Councillor Barnes, the second. Nods of approval or a thumbs up. Yeah, that's good. Thank you very much. That's that. Apologies and substitution. Apart from the ones I've mentioned, which are Malcolm and Chairman of Council Brian Drayson. I don't think there's any others, are there, Louise?
No, I've not received any others, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Additional agenda items, there are none. Disclosures of interest. I wouldn't think there would be much on here that should be disclosable, unless perhaps if you're a member of East Sussex County Council on task and finish group for off-street car parks, but I can't see it really matters. If it comes up and you feel you need to make a declaration, then please do so at the time. I think that's fair. So on to agenda item 5. Purposes of the report to summarise the work of the off-street car parks task and finish group and outline the group's final recommendation to this committee. You'll see there's some recommendations, 5 of them. I'll quickly go through them. Off-street car parks. 1, off-street car parks task and finish group continue beyond April 21 to encompass civil parking enforcement review. So that's the CPE. So that was how we sort of originally sort of envisaged it, I think, was to morph into looking at the on-street parking as well. The off-street car parking group's continuous monitoring work under revised terms of reference to both inform East Sussex County Council on their review of CPE, which will be later on this year or early next year. It's got down here January 22nd, but I think we can start reporting from about October. The monitoring work of the impact of CPE on off-street parking be continued until October 21 to allow for further evidence. Installation of improved signage in relevant car parks, and thorough review of usage and appropriate level of charges for Manor Garden car park be conducted. Vicky Cook, Councillor Cook, you as the chairman of the working group, I'll let you introduce it.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to start by thanking my fellow members on this task and finish group. So thank you to John Barnes, Paul Cortell, Lynn Langlands, Chris Madeley, Paul Osborne and Jeanette Stevens for their help and support in putting together this very complicated and complex report. But especially I'd like to pay tribute to our Democratic Services Officer, Louise, and thank her for her patience, and also to Officers Joe Powell and Deborah Keneally, who've led this report, supported excellently by Lindsay Goodsill, Joanne Wright and Rebecca Owen, who between them have taught me more than I could ever imagine about car parks. So with my thanks for their companionship, I pass to Deborah to lead this report. Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Deborah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Cook. So, good evening, everybody. This report summarises the work of the off-street car parks task and finish group and pulls together their final recommendations for approval. And just as a bit of background, at the end of September 2020, East Sussex County Council introduced civil parking enforcement, which transferred responsibility for on-street parking enforcement from the police to East Sussex County Council, and implemented a variety of restrictions to parking throughout Rother, including charges to park on certain roads in Bexhill, Rye and Battle, resident parking bays, limited parking hours and enforcement of double yellow lines. Now, as per the Civil Parking Enforcement Overview and Scrutiny Committee report back in 2018, the Task and Finish Group were asked to reform to review the impact of civil parking enforcement on council-owned car parks and report back to this committee within 6 months of implementation. And so the group reformed in October 2020 to review the use of council-owned car parks, and their work will also help inform the 12 months East Sussex County Council-led review, which is expected late 2021, early 2022. And members should note that the East Sussex County Council are completing a separate review of on-street parking since CPE introduction, and it will include the reviewing of feedback gained from the public over the course of 12 months. And so people can go online still, and everyone is invited to respond. The review of by East Sussex County Council closes at the end of September 2021, and everyone's encouraged to participate in that. The Car Parks Task and Finish Group were asked to consider car park charges, hours of operation and use of parking permits, whilst taking into account the need to generate sufficient revenue to maintain all aspects of the car park provision. Monthly car park income data and levels of use compared to previous years was monitored and reviewed, alongside information gathered by a call for evidence from parish, councils, businesses, community groups and sports clubs most likely to be impacted by civil parking enforcement. It was noted by members of the group early on that due to COVID-19 restrictions and lockdown, use of the car parks may not reflect a normal level. It was also noted that car parks use may be different in the summer months to the winter months. So following the call for evidence in paragraph 15 shows that the overwhelming response from the parishes, town councils, businesses and community groups, sports clubs, was that they could not provide accurate and appropriate feedback due to COVID-19 lockdown, preventing people going about their normal routines and businesses being closed, thereby supporting the thoughts of the Task and Finish Group. And they requested overwhelmingly that the review be extended. In addition, there were many responses about Bexhill Manor Barn Gardens car park regarding the restriction to only be able to pay at the moment by Ringo, and the level of charges impacting possibly the GP surgery staff, local residents and businesses. That was the main evidence feedback. Other comments were received around the lack of use of out-of-town car parks, such as Wainwright Road, and also a lack of awareness around the availability of car parking permits. The main findings from the analysis of the car park data between the period November 2020 to February 2021 demonstrates that most RDC car parks showed a year-on-year drop in use of between 50% and 75% against the same period in 2019. Paragraph 20, it shows that only Camber Sands defied this trend, showing an increase in income of 7.5%. The data also shows a year-on-year increase in the use of cashless payments via mobile phone Ringo app. So in conclusion, it was agreed by members that both the call for evidence and car park data collected to date would not provide an accurate base on which to make long-term changes to car park operations, but that some benefits may be derived from some more immediate changes. So in paragraph 26, the recommendations, as Chair has already briefly run through, the recommendations set out that the Task and Finish Group continue with their work under amended terms as set out in Appendix 1 attached until October 2021. To both inform the East Sussex County Council-led Civil Parking Enforcement Review and to recommend any changes to car parks to this committee in January 2022. That Wainwright Road, Gibbets Marsh and Lower Market Battle car parks be designated as long stay car parks and charges altered as set out in paragraph 26, section 4, to encourage higher levels of use. That chargeable hours be brought in line across all car parks from 8 AM to 7 PM to simplify the structure and become more in line with civil parking enforcement. That signage be installed to promote long stay car parks. That the installation of signage detailing the availability of parking permits be noted. That a cash and card payment machine be installed at Manor Barn Gardens car park, and that a review of Manor Barn Gardens car park charges be completed in detail. Thank you, Chair. That's a brief summary of the report.
Thank you very much. Before I continue, I've got Councillor Stevens, who is here and has put in this as a substitute or potential substitute. Can we stand her in for Martin Mooney, who is not here? Is that allowed, Louise? Probably should be, shouldn't it?
If you're agreeable to that, Chair, yes.
Well,
That's
I am.
your
I hope
decision.
everybody else would be. So, if Councillor Stevens is still here, then please become a member of the committee for this evening. And Councillor Courtauld has a declaration of interest, which I would assume he can bring it up at the relevant agenda item. So Robin wishes to interject at the end of Deborah's introduction. Robin?
Sorry, Chairman, it was just to pick up Councillor Stevens' comment in the chat to allow her as substitute member for the committee. So that's all been dealt with. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, any questions of the or points to raise with regard to the car park working group? Councillor Errington.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say thank you again to the Task and Finish group and all the officers. I know that an awful lot of time and effort has gone into this report, and as a Bexhill councillor, I really appreciate it. Only last week, I received an inquiry from a resident who'd gone to use Manor Barn car park and forgotten to take her mobile phone. So I'm really, I say, grateful for the time that they've spent. They've really taken on board the comments that have been made by members of the public. And I think they've come up with some fair and creative solutions. The only thing, there's a few things that I just wanted to say is around maybe the advertising of some of these car parks. I think it's great that we've looked at reducing things, but we need to make sure that they're advertised for workers and tourism. I think the £2 a day is really encouraging. And also the bringing the alignment of the hours to 7 o'clock in the evening, in particular the Delaware Pavilion. For me personally, it used to grate a little bit where I'd come to something that started at 7:30. Yes, I had to pay until 8 o'clock. So I think that actually it's a lot of common sense and a lot of good ideas has come out of this. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I would agree with you there. The signage, what we was sort of, I think it's fair to say we was looking at the signage sort of picking up on the fact that you can buy a season ticket as well, which I think a season ticket is £323 a year, which works out, you know, if you're parking 7 days a week, 88p a day. So it's less than £1 a day, which is even cheaper than £2. And you can purchase them, I think, in a 3-month or a 6 monthly, so you don't have to sort of stump up the whole £323 in one go, which is quite a lump. It could potentially, whether we can do a weekly ticket or a monthly ticket for workers, you know, whether a 5-day ticket is enough or not, I don't know. Maybe that's worth sort of looking at as well. I've got a number of councillors wishing to speak. I'll bring in the cabinet portfolio holder, Councillor Field, who wishes to add her words. Councillor Field.
Yes, thank you. I don't want to say a great deal because I certainly don't want to preempt anything that Cabinet might be saying. I would like you to note, this isn't a declaration, that I'm a member of East Sussex County Council. And again, thank you to the group for a huge amount of work. I've been involved in car parking before, and I know it's very complicated and very hard, and everybody has a view. Drivers have a view, and in fact so do non-drivers, because they don't like drivers parking outside their houses if they don't like the car parks or can't find anywhere on the street. So massive problem. I think the Camber news is good, and as a dog owner, I would say that we're a resilient bunch, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if the increase of parking in Camber continues, because more people have got dogs in lockdown, and we are good at walking and like walking. I had a concern, though, over the reduction in recommendation 6, potentially, of parking charges in long stay car parks. No one has complained to me that these have ever been a problem. And I worry about loss of income, particularly in these straitened times when councils find it hard to raise income. I also have a slight concern about the long stay car parks, in that all the time I've been around, they keep changing their role and their pricing and their opening hours. So it's good that I think opening hours, charging hours are being regulated across the district. But I do think that once this change has been made, it would be really good if it stayed that way for quite some time so people could get used to it. And my final thing is, you're winding up in October 21. I had sort of assumed this would become a standing committee, because CPE is reviewed every year. And I would have hoped that the excellent work this has started could be built on when CPE is next reviewed. Are my only comments. But again, thank you so much to everybody for an enormous piece of work, really useful and a very succinct report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cook, do you wish to respond?
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. Thank you for your comments, Councillor Field. Our main aim with reducing the charges for the long stay car park was because they are slightly out of town. We wanted people to use them rather than pollute our streets, driving around for that non-existent free parking space, or clogging up the car parks that the local residents might want to use to quickly nip into the shops. So our aim was to make it a much more economical way for people who wanted to visit for the whole day to be able to park outside of the town at a cheaper rate, without people sort of keep nipping out and moving their car 500 yards just so that they can get a free car parking space. That was our main aim with that one. But thank you for your comments.
I think if I can add to that as well, I think it was sort of probably this time last year, the prices were increased quite a bit. I know in Jewett Marsh they were increased to a £5, and the main sort of long stay car park, if you like, is in the centre of town, which is a market car park, which is available every day except a Thursday, and they charge £2 a day. So our thinking was, if Jewett Marsh is £2 a day, then it brings it in line with that one, and it may encourage people to use it more than at a £5 a day, obviously. Robin may have an issue with that, which he'll probably bring up at Cabinet. I'm sure he will. Also, we did have representation from Councillor Dixon with regard to the lower market car park in Battle, again with the reduction in cost down to £3, which he was happy with. So Councillor Field may need an off-grid conversation with a fellow ward member or fellow cabinet member, if you like.
Thank you for your advice, Chair.
Yeah. Councillor Cortell, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. As I was on the Task and Finish group, may I give way to Councillor Gray, who was not, and speak later?
Okay, yeah, fine. Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add my special thanks to the whole committee for taking on this thankless task, but especially for making a special case of Manor Gardens car park. That has caused particular problems for residents of the old town, and also for visitors to the doctor's surgery, which is immediately opposite. I know Councillor Madeley will join me in this, but it has caused massive problems, and I do appreciate you making a special case for them. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cortell, do you wish to come back?
Yes, please. Yes, I welcome what Councillor Gray's just said. Having advocated strongly for Manor Gardens car park, and there are other decisions I wish to welcome. The improved signage at Little Common in particular, where we've effectively got an empty car park because no one sees the sign because it's so tiny. The recommendation concerning the reduction from £5 to £2 Wainwright Road, which is in my ward, is something I particularly welcome, and I think it should help with regards to attracting in-town parking. Yeah, the recommendation for concerning the payment machine at Manor Gardens as well is something I greatly welcome, because there were a number of elderly people who were finding it very difficult to pay for parking. I think there are a few concerns that remain in my mind, and in particular, as Councillor Gray just said, the low-paid staff at the doctor's surgery. I'm also concerned about the bowling community at the Polegrove, and as well as the completely empty car park at Edgerton Road when all the neighbouring streets are packed. And I hope that as the committee progresses with its deliberations, we'll find solutions in each of these cases.
Okay, thank you. I'm assuming Councillor B is John Barnes.
It is indeed. So I didn't realise I'd come up as Councillor B. I will put my name in next time. I just wanted really to support Councillor Cook in her field. When you look at the evidence here, the Wainwright car park and Gibbets Marsh were being underutilised. So far from maximising income, we were in danger of forfeiting income. Whether we've pitched the charge at the right price, I think time will tell. But it was certainly done not to minimise our income, but in part to actually get those car parks into use. We had a strong plea, of course, then that we should put Lower Market on the same basis. And I think that's a more questionable decision, but in equity, it seemed right not to penalise Battle residents when you were benefiting Bexhill and Rye. So I would defend that going forward, but I think we should keep it under review. The evidence from this year, of course, is, for obvious reasons, wholly distorted, which is a good reason for, I think, continuing our work, watching how the emergence from lockdown actually helps us to reach a more balanced conclusion. I think the can that we deliberately kicked down the road slightly was the extremely tricky one of Manor Gardens. It's not that I think anybody doesn't think we've got a problem there. The difficulty is coming up with an equitable and workable solution. And what we've done is, in fact, to put that very much onto the agenda for future working. And we've met the most immediate need, which is recommending putting in a different method of charging, because clearly a lot of people, not a majority, but a significant minority, were having considerable difficulty with adjusting to a cashless society. I think myself this is an excellent first step, and we really need to build the two reviews together so that we look at the interaction between the on-street parking and the off-street to make sure that we get the best possible scheme for the residents of Rother. I would like, if nobody else is moving the report, to move the report and in particular the recommendations of Cabinet.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stevens, you wish to speak. You're in right.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to echo what Councillor Barnes and Councillor Cook have just said. These car parks that we want to reduce are underused. I walk around Gibbets Marsh nearly every day with my dog, and there is hardly any cars in there. So I can't see how there would be a loss of income, because once people know it's cheaper, more people will use it. So even if you get 3 times more cars in there, you're doubling your money anyway. So, yeah, I echo that I think this is the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dixon, are you there? You're the finance man. Do you have a view on this? Maybe he doesn't. Or maybe he does. What about you, Robin?
Chairman, I think, as has been said, the main thing is around increasing usage and affecting the street scene by removing cars from the street scene as best as possible. And clearly, by that lower charge, that should attract more people into the car park and off of the street. So it can only be a good thing, I would think. As you say, we'll be monitoring it closely to see how the overall income levels are and making sure that they cover their costs as they should do. So, and we can review it. That's the nice thing about the charges. They are reviewed every year, so we can review them anyway, as well as the task and finish group. We can actually do the annual reviews we do for all fees and charges. So plenty of opportunity.
Okay, that's good. Well, I'm sure Councillor Cook would have preferred to move the recommendation, but as Councillor Barnes has done so, then he's jumped in. So the recommendation has been moved by Councillor Barnes and seconded by Councillor Cook. Councillor Errington, he also wanted to second it, so I'll go with Councillor Cook as the chairman of the group. So unless there's anything else to say, over to you, Louise, for hopefully all in favour.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, councillors, I'll call your names out alphabetically. Please respond with for, against or abstain. Councillor Barnes.
For.
Councillor Carroll.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Mrs Cook.
For.
Councillor Cortell.
For.
Councillor Mrs Earl Williams.
For.
Councillor Errington.
For.
Councillor Gray.
For.
Councillor Madeley.
For.
Councillor Maynard.
For.
Councillor Osborne.
For.
And Councillor Stevens.
For.
That's unanimous, so carried, Chairman.
Excellent. Thank you very much. One thing I didn't mention, we didn't mention EV park charging points, but then that wasn't part of our remit. But I think that's been mentioned somewhere before in cabinet meeting. I'm sure it has. That EV charging points were being looked at to be put in their car parks. Would you have a view on that, Robin? I know it's not an agenda thing, but
Chairman, I think there has been some work on looking at EV charging points. Clearly, the question will be around how we fund those and whether they can cover their costs. And if we can get to a point where it's fairly cost neutral for the authority, I'm sure we will look at the opportunities that may present us in the future. But it will be part of the future work programme, I'm sure.
Yeah, good. That's for a committee above our remit, if you like. Okay, thanks for that. Right, item 6, key performance targets 2021-22. Ben.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, members will recognise this primarily this paper from the previous cabinet meeting. This is a reference from cabinet for review by overview and scrutiny before final adoption. I know that at that point members had some concerns, and they felt that they would rather raise them in this forum, which is absolutely fine. The proposed KPIs there are set out into the 4 themes, 4 priority areas, and these generally speaking sort of are consistent with the emerging corporate plan. The 11 indicators are set out in the Appendix 1 for the report, and I mean, I won't go through them, but I am happy to take any questions by members at this stage.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barnes, you've come in first.
Yes, there are a number of points which I want to make, but can I begin with a question? I think one of the biggest concerns out in the sticks, it may also be a concern in Bexhill, but obviously I'm less well aware of that, is around the length of time at the moment it's taking for planning decisions. And what I wanted to ask, Ben, is whether planning comes within the purview of this committee, or does planning committee look at that? Because clearly a performance indicator around that is necessary, I think, now.
I mean, it's a fair question. I think the answer is twofold. Yes, planning committee do review the performance of the planning service periodically. That being said, it's well within the rights of the overview and scrutiny committee within their responsibilities for such activities to review planning decisions, length of time, the length of time it takes to go through the planning system as an operation. Absolutely, that's within the right of the overview and scrutiny committee to review that, should you wish.
I simply think that given the degree of concern, certainly in all the parishes I know, and we've just had in Burwash, Weald, somebody actually go to appeal because of non-determination on a site which frankly is supported by the locals, supported by the parish council. We ought probably to be seen to be responding to that concern. It is one about process, and if we could have a look at what might be a useful indicator, I think we ought to be seen to be taking that seriously. I'll come back to the other points later, Chairman.
Okay. Robin, you wish to interject?
Thank you, Chairman. I do have a recollection of a while, maybe more than 1 year or 2 years ago, that the decision was made. I'm not sure if it was agreed by full council that performance monitoring of planning will be done by a planning committee. So what I might do, that I think that proposal of Councillor Barnes, if that's carried through, might just need to check whether it needs to go to full council for ratification or whether it can be agreed by this committee if there is a previous decision that the full council was made. I haven't got that memory recollection detailed enough in order to provide an answer now, but I will have to go. I'll go away and have a look and see what, if any, further authority might be required.
I share your slightly shaky memory on that, which is why I've introduced it as tentatively as I did. It's just that I think we should be seen when there is public concern to be responding to it. I know there is a planning inquiry anyway, planning review going on at the moment, which is another way of mitigating the problem.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I always I was always under the impression that the beginning of a fair number of planning committees, they used to sort of have a sort of a State of the Union address, if you like, of where they stood. I can see where Councillor Barnes is coming from. If there's, we know there are significant delays in the planning department, but equally so, if we sort of decide as a committee, well, let's call it in and see what's what, do we then take planners away from planning, if you like, to respond to our concerns, which then makes the problem potentially worse? So it's a bit of an awkward one. Would you agree with that, Ben?
It is. I mean, but it's also. I think it's a fair comment about about the concerns of the community, and if members feel that this is something that they want to monitor as part of the KPIs, then I suppose what I would say is you could make a recommendation to cabinet for the next cabinet that this be considered for inclusion. It gives Robin and I and Louise and Lisa time to go away and just look at the detailed wording behind the previous council decision, and then be able to update at cabinet whether or not it then needs to go to council.
I think that's probably a sensible way forward, actually. And then the cabinet portfolio for planning will be obviously at cabinet as well, so he can answer any questions and either take it on board or vote it down, can't he?
Yeah, I mean, we do just for reassurance. I mean, Councillor Osborne, you'll know, Chair, that we do monitor an extensive range of performance indicators, less so now than we used to, because we suddenly realised that there was a lot that weren't, we were measuring these things but never actually paying any attention to them. So we've really boiled it down to the most important things. But there's a range of, I think it's about 27 health check indicators that are reviewed by the chief executive every month, and this is one of them. So he's fully aware of the state, and obviously one of those they could easily be transferred into a key performance indicator for the purposes of scrutiny if recommended to do so by cabinet.
Okay. Was you finished with your questioning, Councillor Barnes?
There are a number of points I want to make later on, but I'm happy to wait my turn.
Okie dokie. Councillor Cook.
Thank you very much. I have a question for Ben. Ben, are we limited to just 4 priority areas for our KPIs?
We're not, and I mean, what I would say is historically, we've tried to limit the number of KPIs just to those things that are sort of most crucial and most critical to the council in any given year, and that can be reflective of a poor performance or of a key activity that's happening in every given year. I think what tends to happen is if you get too many key performance indicators, then the focus tends to get watered down in terms of ensuring we focus performance where it needs to be. Like I did say, we do have an extensive number of performance indicators that are managed on the officer level, which, if we feel they're teetering into the realms of poor performance or into the realms of where members would probably not be that satisfactory, that's when we start to have those conversations about maybe elevating them to this list.
Okay, only I just wonder if we could add KPIs concerning the achievements that we are making with working towards our climate emergency motion, and particularly our draft environment strategy. Now, I see from paragraph 5 that it is anticipated to add them in 2022 to 23, but I wondered if we started now, it would actually help us when we're formulating from the draft environment strategy to the environment strategy. We'd have some ideas and we'd all be able to scrutinise what we're doing to better effect. I mean, you just commented yourself about noting KPIs and then actually not doing anything about them. But if we had those KPIs in practice now, when we come to finalise the environment strategy, we would have something to base it on. We would see where we're beginning to grow, what we're beginning to succeed at, and what we can aim at to do better.
Sounding very similar to the arguments that Councillor Field put to me when I first drafted the cabinet paper, I must say, and she was quite vocal in the same sense about having something with regards to the environment strategy. The one thing I would say is at the moment we just don't have any baseline metrics to compare against. So, in terms of the progress against projects and activity, that's very, I would like to say, well handled by the steering group, which will then report up in periodic fashion. In terms of a sort of a monthly metric or a yearly metric, that we haven't established a baseline yet against which to measure, and that was the whole point of this buying a sort of this extra year, if you like, is that gives us time to establish a baseline metric, which will be informed by the environment strategy manager as to how best to manage that progress, monitor that progress. Is it, reduction in carbon footprint? Is it decrease in car usage? That sort of thing throughout the district. and so she's going to help us shape that to introduce next year. At the moment, we just don't have really the right set of metrics to introduce or any baseline data against which to measure future performance, if you see what I mean. So that's what we are working on this year. So hopefully when it comes to next year's KPIs, there'll be something that can really demonstrate that progress that is being made, on top of obviously the other reporting mechanisms that we get through the steering group and cabinet and this committee here.
Lovely, thank you very much. I guess the carbon literacy training, hit home really a bit. And I just
a bit, yeah.
maybe if we started now thinking, well, let's see if we can improve some aspects of the work we're doing as a sort of a work to it. But you've explained the reasoning. Thank you very much.
I think, to agree with Ben, the climate action group is meeting on a regular basis. So yeah, it's not sort of pushed under the carpet as such. So it's there and meeting. And once that sort of comes, sort of to a bit of fruition, then as Ben says, there'll be some figures to work on, and you've got something to sort of improve upon. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yeah, that's what we're aiming for. And I think, I need to speak to Deborah Keneally about it, obviously, who's service manager for that function. But I'd like to see those KPIs that are going to come through go through that steering group process, so that they're that steering group is the group that's sort of formulating what that looks like and how to recommend that up to this committee before going on to cabinet.
Okay. Councillor Cortell, I know you sent an email in earlier with a number of questions. I'm not sure if Ben's answered them directly to you or not, but the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I did circulate a number of questions to you all, and particularly to give Ben a heads up, so as not to put him on the spot at the meeting this evening, and I'll go through them. My first question was purely one of clarification, which was in paragraph 4, you mentioned the programme board to monitor the corporate programme. What's the likely composition of this board? Is it cabinet members? Is it officers? Is it both? Is it other councillors?
It's this is something that will be presented to cabinet for determination when we present the outcome of the consultation for the corporate plan and the developed corporate programme. In previous years, in previous iterations of the corporate programme board, it was just the senior management team at the council, as was Dr. Leonard, Malcolm Johnston, and Robin Venard. What we're recommending this time round is that there be a presence of members on that. My anticipation is that would likely be a couple of key leading cabinet members, as yet to be determined, along with the chief executive and probably the section 151 officer. So you've got that very senior level sort of scrutiny of the corporate programme. What I would say is that the corporate plan and programme performance will be reported back to this committee at least every 6 months, if in that sort of 6 monthly cycle, with a brief report just to provide updates.
Thank you. Moving on, I noticed that indicators 1 and 2 relate to temporary accommodation. My concern is that while trying to keep the numbers down on temporary accommodation, we may forget the rough sleeping community, something which Rother Council has brilliantly solved during COVID. And I would not like to see it go up again. And I wondered whether we could have a further indicator for rough sleeping. And I believe that the last time we were presented the figures for rough sleeping, it was 2 across Rother. So could we perhaps have a target of 2 which would then continue to focus housing officers on ensuring that rough sleeping doesn't climb again?
Chair, if I may, I'd like to respond to that.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank Councillor Cortell for giving me a bit of a heads up on this question, because I think it gave me really time to consider the pros and cons of sort of a response in terms of a recommendation back to the committee. I think the one key thing that Councillor Cortell sort of pulled out there is actually the performance in terms of ensuring sort of a low number of rough sleepers is actually quite good. You know, like you said, the last time it was 2, and you're right, we don't want to see it going up, and we do monitor, regularly. I know that happens through the housing service, and that is reported up to government. What I would say is, if that number were to change and go up, then we would, on an officer level, recognise that very early, and it would be sort of reported up to the chief executive, at which point we might then say to the committee, oh look, this is now an opportunity to monitor this. What I'm a bit reticent to do is sort of propose that we monitor things that were actually going quite well at the moment, because we really want to focus scrutiny on those areas that are either of high importance or of poor performance. Do you see what I mean? So that we can really make sure that we're focusing on those. And whilst it is of importance, it's at the moment the performance is very, very good. Yes. And just sort of, whilst it's nice to scream about our achievements, the KPIs are as much about sort of making sure that we're doing a good job as anything else. So, I mean, my recommendation would be that we leave it off for now, and if it does start to creep up, then obviously we bring that to members' attention, particularly in the wake of COVID and the changes to the housing position.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I will withdraw my proposal in view of your sound and reasoned argument, Ben. Moving on, there's a figure in Indicator 1 of 79 households in temporary accommodation in November 2020, and it's proposed that this be reduced to 60 households as the target. In view of the change in government policy on evictions, and in view of the likely change in government policy on furloughing, is this not a little too ambitious? Should we perhaps be more realistic and put the target at the 90 rather than 60, at a time when we know there'll be enormous pressure on temporary accommodation?
Am I right in thinking, Ben, that we have a figure of 60? Obviously, we would prefer to see it at 0, wouldn't we? But I think, am I right in thinking that we put a figure at 60 so that's for sort of budgetary reasons as well, so that you've got a budget to work to? Am I right there?
There is an aspect of that, yeah. It's this sort of there's a certain aspect to that. I think, Councillor Cortell raises a point. Yes, it's ambitious. It's not unachievable to get to 60 households throughout the year, and it should be something that we aim to do. My concern is that if we move targets in the wrong direction, then it's buying ourselves the ability to say, oh look, we've achieved a target, but maybe a target wasn't stretching enough for us. And I would rather get to 62 households and miss the target than get to a target of 70 and feel content. Do you see what I mean? I think the worst case scenario here is that we don't get to 60, but we continue to work towards that. And it's about setting stretch targets. I think we had a similar discussion last year about setting stretch targets. This one may be a very big stretch, but I think it's also something that we should continue to work towards that. And the other aspect is we don't really know what the full impact of the decisions on COVID will be yet. And I think as we move through the year, we'll be able to explain that better.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Cortell?
Well, yes, but I still feel that two areas of government policy, which, as Ben has quite rightly said, we don't know exactly, are likely to cause an increase in temporary accommodation, and I feel we're giving the Housing Department an unfair target.
No, I'm afraid I wouldn't agree with you there. I would prefer to keep it at 60, which to my mind is still too high, but that's as it is, if you like. I think if we increase the target to 90, whilst being more achievable, I think at the bottom line is that you've potentially got 30 more households in temporary accommodation that we are, if you like, at ease with. You know, it could be seen that we're at ease with more people in temporary accommodation than we need to. And I would prefer to keep the target as low and achievable as possible. I think we've got to bear in mind that there will always be homeless people for what reason or not, and our option is to reduce the time they're in temporary accommodation. So I would prefer to keep the target at 60. It still seems strange to anybody watching this on YouTube. I think, oh, the bloke's looking at a target of 60 households in temporary accommodation, which is not the case at all. We want zero, but that's sort of not achievable. So, does anybody else have any thoughts, or do you sort of get my reasoning, Councillor Cortell?
I get your reasoning.
It's one of the points I wanted to talk about, Paul. If we can move on.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, shall I give way to Councillor Barnes on this point and thrash out this point before moving on to my other points?
Go on, then, Councillor Barnes.
Yes, I'm afraid I'm not with Councillor Cortell on this one. This is within our control. We are laying out quite sizable sums in capital monies to actually acquire properties to house the homeless. And indeed, we've just endorsed a further instalment of that programme. So it seems to me that we will be sending the wrong signal to the public of what we're trying to do if we were to act too prudentially on this one. I think we do need to be seen to be saying this is a high priority for us. I suspect that if I were in control of the risk register, I might very well want to make sure that the risk is possibly evaluated on the risk register. But again, the other danger with what Councillor Cortell is wanting is he's plucked a figure very much out of the air. If we were going to try to set a more scientific target, I would really want to see what the risks are and what the evidence is. But I think we should be aspirational on this one because it's driving us to solve a problem which is both social and human, but also has quite serious financial consequences for us. If we don't actually meet it out of our own resources, you actually find that you're taking an awful lot of money away from other services in order to fund something which we haven't budgeted properly for. So for a variety of reasons, although I've some sympathy with the risks that we're facing, and I think we need to acknowledge them, I think we should be setting an ambitious direction of travel and putting capital into trying to meet that target. Because it seems to me that in the long run will actually be better for our clientele and actually save us money.
Thank you. Councillor Cortell, are you done or
Thank
are there
you.
more?
Yeah, my next issue was very much along the same lines. Another target I thought was too ambitious, indicator 3, where we're talking about a reduction number of households on the housing register from 1,712 in November 2020 to 1,200. Again, just like the temporary housing, I would love to see it happen, but I can't realistically see it happen. And I think we're setting up the housing department to fail on this, because it's just not, frankly, realistic, in my opinion.
Is that not a sort of historic target, Ben?
It's actually one that was that's incorporated into the emerging corporate plan, which is, it was set by the sort of the alliance as a group, as part of their as part of their priorities, which has now been translated into the emerging corporate plan. 1,200 is a number that was very specifically mentioned, and given that number was so specifically mentioned, it makes only realistic sense that remains the target against which we measure ourselves. I mean, in year one, we may only get to 1,500, but it will make progress towards that 1,200 target. And I know that Joe Powell, as the head of service for housing and communities, is looking at a number of ways to deliver on that on behalf of the corporate plan.
Okay, so
thank you. I apologise. I hadn't registered in my head that this was an agreed target in the corporate plan. Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, indicators 7 and 8 relate to council tax collection and business collection rates. There's been a massive drop in both. We're talking about a reduction from the upper 90s to the mid 70% in both cases. What is going to be the impact on the budget? It's just a question.
Councillor.
Answer for Robin. Would you prefer Robin to take it, Ben?
Well, I was just going to say we're at risk of getting into the debate on the actual, rather than debating what targets we should be looking at, actually debating the performance against those targets, which might be something for a later one. But I think Robin's probably got something he wants to say anyway, so I'll let him go.
Chairman, obviously the figures quoted in the report relate to the collection rate as at November 2020, not the whole year's rate. The whole year's rate is 98.5% target. Our outturn for this year is about 96, I think it is, just over 96%, which is as a result of COVID and the fact that we suspended reminders and any court action in terms of recovery. So that is all now back in place. So in theory, we should see our performance revert back to something close to normal, which is why we reduced it a little bit from 98.5% down to 98.3 for council tax, 98.2 down to 98 for business rates, just to reflect that it's likely to be harder out there, but we are expecting us to be able to bounce back in terms of our collection performance. This also relates to the work, obviously, that the anti-poverty Task and Finish or Working Party are working on in terms of our council tax reduction scheme as well, and that's a discussion we're having tomorrow. Well, they are all related, but we're expecting things to get back to our operational side, where we getting back to more normal activity this year. So hopefully our rates of collection will improve in 21-22. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Cortell?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Osborne.
Is that it now?
Well, the last one I had was concerning indicator 11, and that was the proposed target of a limited saving of £107,000 on various fees and charges. And it seems to me that there is an attempt to find every possible area to charge a little more, and in order to meet this target. And one of the areas that is causing some tension is obviously parking, which we've covered in the previous debate. And I just feel that maybe again we've got a target which is a little too ambitious and which is more financially oriented than looking at our customers, which is the main objective of the corporate plan. The core objective, the number one objective in the corporate plan, was about being a customer-centric organisation. And possibly we're putting finance a little bit ahead of that, and that concerns me.
Ben, do you have a view on that one?
I mean, sort of not going to maybe tackle the political side of that question, because that's one for members to determine. But in terms of what's being proposed here, this is very clearly, quite clearly says here about discretionary services. So it's not something, we're not talking about in terms of item 11, we're not talking about additional income through services that we would normally provide as part of our general function. So it is something that we do on top of what we normally do. But Robin's appeared on the screen, so I'm assuming he's probably got something to add to that as well.
I saw him pop up with his microphone on. So Robin, what are you going to say?
Sorry, Chairman, it was just a little bit of clarification around that figure, which largely relates back to our garden waste service in terms of the charging rate and the number of customers. So broadly, that is what we expect to generate in additional fees from that area. Plus, as members will be aware, we have set up the Financial Stability Programme Board, and part of that review is to look at our fees and charges and see whether we can maximise them, as Councillor Cortell has identified.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you all done now, Councillor Cortell?
I am. Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Osborne.
That's all right. Thank you. Councillor Errington.
Yeah, sorry, it's just very quickly going back to the planning potential KPIs. We do actually have quarterly stats that appear on the planning committee reports, and those are obviously in the public domain. I think there are also annual stats that compare our performance with other local authorities, but I would like to see what the planning review comes out with, because I'm sure they're going to have some comments on performance. So it may well be that in time they're included, but there's obviously quite a lot going on at the moment. Thank you.
That's a good point. That's a good point, and sort of confirms my suspicions, if you like, of a report. So every now and again. Thank you. Councillor Barnes, you wish to come back? You're on muted, Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chairman. I begin with my most obvious point, almost my King Charles's head. I still think we should distinguish between targets and indicators. I can't think of a better word than an indicator, but it's something over which we have no control. It's like a piece of litmus paper. It turns pink, but we can't control whether it's going to turn pink or not. Whereas with targets, they should be about what we do have some control over. Housing makes my point, if you turn to Appendix A, page 13, makes the point perfectly. 1 and 2, we can actually influence, and influence very strongly. In fact, if we get our capital programme right, we could actually end up pretty well solving that problem over time, which is why I think we need to set quite an ambitious direction of travel. I have much more sympathy with Councillor Cortell on 3, because we have much less control over that. And when we come to 4 and 5, we have virtually no control whatsoever. Effectively, we can give all the planning permissions we want, but unless the builders build out, we don't get the houses. and they produce the viability assessments. So to lump those 5 together as if they are even status targets, I think is misleading ourselves and misleading the public. So I think we really ought to have targets and important pieces of information to guide us on what is going on in our area. And they shouldn't be using quite the same language. That said, I have to say 4 and 5 trouble me because we know very well that actually we have an extremely limited power to actually deliver on those. What we necessarily need to do, and we don't do, is to make sure that we have an adequate land supply to build the houses necessary. Even that's difficult, but that at least we've got some control over, because you can, in the last resort, compulsory purchase. Second point I wanted to make was it would be useful at some stage to look at everything that is measured. I think we're quite right, and Ben was right to emphasize it, that what we do here is to single out the ones that we want to look at. The officers obviously are measuring a much larger range, and the chief executive needs to keep an eye on many more areas than we do. Third point, I think also where I echo Ben, is I do think we need to get the climate change group to think what they want to be measured, because then we can start establishing a baseline. But it's no good starting to measure things if you don't know what you're doing at the present moment. County took 1 or 2 years before they finally settled on what was best to measure. And of course, one of the most obvious ones is your overall carbon footprint. And we set ourselves in the end an annual target of a 13% reduction each year. But if you don't know what your carbon footprint is at the moment, it's very hard to know what to set and how fast you're going to achieve it. I think really those are general points that I wanted to make, but I rather agree. It seems a bit odd to actually beginning to set targets around what we expect the council tax take to be. Those are essentially budget assumptions, and I'm not sure why we're targeting those unless we think we can do something about them. On the other hand, when it comes to income, we are talking about resources. We will have to prioritize, because if you don't, you'll end up hitting the very people we want to help by trying to help customers more generally. It's not a very pleasant task, which is why really our property income is absolutely vital to deliver. So having targets around asset income and additional income generation are absolutely crucial because they underpin your whole strategy. But I'm less happy about 6, 7, and 8. They're really budget assumptions. They're not targets at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm sort of I don't agree with everything you said there, Councillor Barnes. I think that having I think some of these targets like 4 and 5 especially sort of give us an idea of what's going on. If we don't sort of have an idea.
Chairman, if you remember, I didn't say we shouldn't measure them.
No.
I said we shouldn't treat them as targets. If we have a category of measures which are useful information to us, that's different from calling them targets.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Ben, what's your thought?
I mean, I think I'm sure Councillor Barnes won't forgive me for this, but I think we do wield a certain degree of more control over 4 and 5 than maybe is initially thought, particularly now that we have the housing company that can push forward these things. I think one of the simple points is that a way of sort of measuring these things as well is to say, okay, well, look, annually our local plan target is 449 homes. If we're only granting 200 permissions, then we're never going to get there. Do you see what I mean? So we have to, I suppose, we have to recognise that there is an early stage link between the number of permissions granted and the number of homes delivered at the end of that. Also, we do an awful lot of work in working with the enabling side in trying to help developers bring these sites forward. Yes, sometimes they come forward with a viability argument and that's accepted. Other times we bat them back quite comprehensively and say we work with them and other ways to bring the site forward. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, there are degrees of influence over these targets. Some we have a greater degree of influence, some we have a lesser degree of influence. But I think a target in this sense is to say, look, this is what we should be achieving. Robin wants to say something, so I'll step back now and let him interject as well.
Robin, chip in.
No, sorry, Chairman, I didn't mean to interrupt Ben. It was only really to pick up the points 6, 7 and 8 on from Councillor Barnes's inquiry, really. They are about, as you say, it's under the economic development and poverty sort of banner. So as you say, they are indicators of activity, but they do reflect some of what we are doing as well. So, for example, in business rates, we are looking at how we can encourage new businesses and expand businesses to create jobs, which then has an effect on council tax reduction numbers as well. So they are indicators of activity, but they are supported by council action, and therefore part of the narrative that we need to give members when explaining these indicators is to give them that broader narrative that helps them understand what we're doing as a council and that's affecting or not affecting, as the case may be, those indicators. So it's a vehicle, if you like, for that explanation for members. You get a more wider understanding or contextual understanding of what's going on in the district, both in terms of economic development but also in terms of poverty as well.
Thank you. Do you agree with that, Ben? And are you done? Had enough?
I'll make it a point of never disagreeing with Robin when he's right.
That's all right. Well, the recommendation is resolved that this committee review the key performance targets for 2021-22, recommend any actions, amendments to Cabinet as necessary. Do we necessarily have any actions or amendments?
Chair, it was recommended at the beginning, at the top, with regards to the planning decisions, the length of time for planning. Did we want to include that as part of the recommendation going up back to Cabinet, giving us time to review the position with regards to the Constitution and the roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, so we can add that one in.
Okay.
That makes sense. I think that would be useful. Yeah, because it's going to be a little while before it gets to Cabinet now, isn't it, I assume, because we've moved meetings about a bit, haven't we?
Yeah, I'd probably go back to late May now. I think it should be relatively quick to turn around.
Yeah, okay. Can I have someone happy to move that recommendation? Councillor Cook, are you happy with that?
Happy to move, Chair, with the recommendation. With the recommendation.
Bit. Yeah, okay. Someone happy to second that?
I will.
Councillor Polly Gray, thank you very much. We need a vote on this one, don't we, Louise?
Yes, please, Chairman.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, councillors, I'll call your names out alphabetically. Please respond with for, against, abstain. Councillor Barnes.
For.
Councillor Carroll.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Mrs Cook.
For.
Councillor Cortell.
Abstain.
Councillor Mrs Earl Williams.
For.
Councillor Errington,
4,
Councillor Gray,
4,
Councillor Madeley.
4,
I believe Councillor Maynard has left the meeting.
Yep.
Councillor Osborne
4.
and Councillor Stevens.
4.
That's carried, Chair.
That's carried. Right. Thank you very much, members, for that one. Let's go. Item 7. Calling and urgency procedures. Resolved that this report be noted. There was one small change. Well, not change. It was identified to me by Councillor Ganley. Page 20. B on page 20 says blah 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 blah. Unless the Overview and Scrutiny Committee or any 2 executive members objects to it and calls it in, should actually read unless the chairman of Overview and Scrutiny Committee or any 2. So there's just one word going in there. Oh, Deborah Cleaney, can I be excused? Yes, you can. Thank you for your attendance, Deborah. Yeah, so that was just a slight change there, and we probably thought it's probably been like that for years anyway. So because it's fine in C. Any points on this one? No. All happy, I would assume. Someone want to move?
Sorry,
Councillor Cortell.
I did have a point. I couldn't get my name into the message in time. I apologise. Just a question that I wrote to the chief executive about, not having realised he wasn't around and that Robin was standing in for him. So I apologise, Robin, for not having mailed you in advance on this. Paragraph 4. I don't quite understand. It may be me who's being a little bit dense on this, but it says that the call-in procedure are contained within part 2 of the minutes. I mean, presumably we can call things in from part 1 of a cabinet meeting, or am I just misunderstanding this?
Yeah, if you like, Robin, I've got well, unless you've got it as well, I've got Malcolm's reply here. So I'll read it out, and it makes sense. Quote: not everything discussed by Cabinet, whether in public or confidential session, can be called in. Part 1 of the Cabinet meeting, Cabinet minutes relates to recommendations to Council, which are not subject to a call-in because they're going to Council. While part 2 deals with resolved items, which can be called in as there are being decisions being made by Cabinet within the agreed policy and budgetary framework and can be enacted once call-in period has elapsed. So whether something is in part 1 or 2 is not determined by confidentiality, but by the rules applied by the subject matter under discussion. So basically, pretty much, unless it's an urgent decision, but usually if it's referred to Council, then we can't call it in. But if it's a decision of Cabinet that we take exception to, then we can call it in. I think that's pretty basic.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got one other question, if I may. Has the working party that's working on the Constitution got any changes proposed to the Constitution for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee?
Wouldn't know. Do you have an answer to that, Robin?
Yeah. All I was going to say is I'm not aware of any at this moment in time.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Barnes. You're on mute again. Hopefully I won't have to say this much more often.
It's the rhythm of the year, isn't it? I think paragraph 4 is clear enough, although it is slightly odd because you occasionally get as we did with the town hall scheme, something which had a part 1 and a part 2 of its own, which meant it neatly crossed that normal divide in the agenda. In the end, of course, we did something quite different, which was to agree to bring it back to overview and scrutiny, so it didn't need to be called in. But those hybrid resolutions probably do mean that 4 is perhaps slightly oversimple as stated. That said, I think we're working the call-in procedure perfectly well, and I think it works extremely well. I wouldn't want to see it change myself, so I'm very happy to support what's said here.
Okay, so you're happy to move the recommendation?
Happy to do that if you want, Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Happy to-
Councillor Cook.
Happy to second.
Okay. What do you want on this one, then, Louise? This is just a nod, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It's just a report for noting, so there's no need to take a vote.
So if everybody's happy, a little nod or a little thumbs up would be fine. I think that's passed. Thank you very much, everybody. That's what we got now. Item 8. Oh yeah. Item 8. Recommendation resolves that the contents of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee draft annual report to Council be considered and recommended as appropriate to Council. I won't say this is all my own work because it's not. Louise has put this together, so thank you, Louise. You can see, as usual, we've been pretty busy over the year, even though we've not actually seen each other properly for over a 12-month. We've been busy bees, and a lot of good work has gone on, obviously. Any points anybody wish to make? Councillor Errington.
Hi, sorry again. I would just like to thank Claire and Kieran and all the team. I'm sure that 13 months ago they didn't envisage spending their evenings with us. I'm grateful for all the support in enabling us to broadcast to YouTube, which has meant a lot to an awful lot of people during the past year. So I'm sure I speak on behalf of all the committee, and especially as this is potentially our last online meeting, to say thank you very, very much for everything that you've done to support us over the last year. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you for saying that, Sarah. I think that's right. Claire, I think we've got James here as well tonight. Yeah, thank you for that. And your assistance and keeping us on the straight and narrow and on the broadband or whatever it is. I'm not sure who said that. Councillor Clark, you are live on YouTube. You're muted now. Councillor Clark, you're still muted.
Yeah, something's gone.
That's better.
That's okay. Yeah, looking at the housing and homelessness, Councillor Cortell was picking up earlier about the potential for more evictions and more homelessness. Actually says in that report further cases could rise. One of my concerns is keeping our eye on the ball, because in the first year of the Alliance administration, there was a real stimulus towards increasing housing, especially for social housing. And of course, we had the issue of the COVID, so a lot of contracts and housing projects were not able to continue and have been slowed right down. I just worry to a certain degree is at what point we're going to get a report on how we're going to achieve targets on providing housing, because that will have an effect on the housing waiting list, and also the nuts and bolts of it, like the North Bexhill housing programme, which is, I think, it was only building 50 houses a year, but there were elements of that which were social housing. And when I look at the work programme, I don't see where, unless the officers can advise me, we're actually going to get a report of where we actually stand at the moment, or how we're going to do any catching up, because we were actually looking to in the first year to actually increase social housing based on previous years. But I'm a bit concerned it's not gone off the agenda, but it appears to be that I'm not quite sure in the next 6 months where we're going to get a report on housing and housing completions, the issues about reaching targets, and the other issues around that. Thank you.
Can I ask which agenda item you're referring to at the moment?
Well, I was talking about your housing and homelessness, but I'll just carry that on to where that would stand in the work programme in the future. I couldn't see where it was going to be reported back.
Okay, Ben's got a hand up and Robin wants to interject. So who wants to go first?
No, I'm happy for Ben to go.
No, go.
I was just going to say, Chairman, obviously we do an annual report to Overview and Scrutiny on the performance of the housing and homelessness and rough sleeper strategy. So the points that Councillor Clark raised in terms of the performance against, those objectives will be raised at that annual review. I think we undertook one in November last year, where the various heads of service got a comprehensive grilling by this committee next year.
Okay, does that answer your question, Councillor Clark?
Sorry. Yes, it does, but it seems a bit down the road. I would like to have got information a bit more sooner than that, actually, where we actually are on completions. Thank you.
Okay. Robin, anything you wanted to add?
Chairman, just obviously it will be part of your quarterly monitoring as well, because some of your key KPIs also include delivery of housing as well. So you will get some commentary during the year, and as Ben said, you've got the annual review.
Okay, good. Councillor Barnes, you've indicated.
Yes, Chairman, can we go back to your report?
Yep.
Can I ask you to look at the wording of paragraph 6, which seems to me very oddly worded.
Councillor Clark, oh, that's better. He's gone.
Yeah. I think what it wants to say is that with the 9 cabinet members excluded, 29 members are able to take part in scrutiny, and presumably this is to bring out the fact that nearly 4/5 of us do. But it looks a bit odd the way that sentence is phrased. With 9 cabinet members, this enables. We're not here at the beck and call of the cabinet. We're not enabled by the cabinet. So I think what we need to do is just tidy up the English there. I won't try and draft in committee, but if you can have a look at it.
Okay. Have you sort of worked that one out, Louise?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'll get that amended.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Cortell, did you indicate as well?
I did, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to endorse what Councillor Errington said about thanking Claire and the other officers for their wonderful work in supporting us remotely. And I'd like to request that should be minuted.
Okay, we can do that.
Thank you.
No problem. Right. Well, if you're happy with that, Councillor Cook, can I ask you to move that?
You certainly can. It'll be my pleasure to do so.
Thank you very much. And a seconder?
Seconded, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Again, this is, we don't need a vote on this one, do we, Louise? It's just a show of hands, isn't it? Or general nod?
Well, it is an agreement that this report goes to council, so I think we probably should have a vote.
Better vote then. Better for a proper vote. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Barnes.
For.
Councillor Carroll. Councillor Carroll. Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Mrs Cook.
For.
Councillor Cortell.
For.
Councillor Mrs Earl Williams. Councillor Mrs Earl Williams. Councillor Errington.
For.
Councillor Gray.
For.
Councillor Madeley.
For.
Councillor Osborne.
For.
And Councillor Stevens.
For.
That's carried, Chair.
For from Carol as well, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. I thought he'd gone to watch the final of Mastermind for a minute. Right, last one, item 9, work programme. Any views on this? I think it's all pretty well there. A lot of it is what we have to do anyway. We've got items for consideration at the bottom. Obviously, we have, once the new committee is formed after the annual council meeting, we'll then probably do what we did last year, send out an email picking up any points that people may have received on during the election, and anything else that may need adding on or thinking about. Any views from anybody? All pretty happy? Councillor Cortell.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to suggest that we consider putting the nurseries in Bexhill, which are listed as an item for consideration, into the June meeting, because I think a decision is being made pretty quickly concerning the Edgerton Park nursery in my ward, and I'm nervous about leaving it for too long.
Okay.
I'd be happy to support Councillor Cortell on that.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes.
All right. Ben, if you're there, would you have a view on that? We've got June. We've got the report of the Anti-Poverty Task and Finish group, which we've been waiting for. Performance fourth quarter, annual work programme, review of disabled facilities grants. There's a fair bit on there already. What do you think, Ben?
My only question, Chairman, would be exactly what it is that members would like me to address in that point. I'm assuming it'd probably fall under me as a property matter. So
it fits very well with anti-poverty, because clearly what happens to children in the first 2 or 3 years, and certainly in the first 5 years of their life, really sets their course for the whole of the next stage of their life and for the future. The evidence from Nottinghamshire suggests that the gap widens from about year 3 on.
My only point is, and I'm probably echoing similar to what Ben's thinking, is where does it lie with us as Rother District Council, because we're not the providers of early years education.
I think that's my concern, Chair, is that as from a Rother District Council perspective, this is a property matter, and I'm happy to talk to that to members, because obviously, if there's any scrutiny on that, we don't really have expertise within the council relating to educational standards, early years education, who I could sort of call on to address the points that might be raised by Councillor Barnes. It very much sits within the remit of county council, which is why I'm happy to address the point about the nurseries in Bexhill. But I fear that as a council, as an officer group, we can only address it from a property perspective, because that's our involvement at this stage. Everything else is either member led, or it sits within the realms of the county council's remit.
Yeah, I don't want to raise educational issues, but making sure that it survives, I think, which is a property issue, is a very important point.
then I'm happy to take it on from a property perspective at that meeting. It should be relatively straightforward.
Okay, well, if you're happy with that, Ben, and we know the sort of direction of travel we've got there, then yeah, if everybody else is happy, we're putting in for that. Mm-hmm. Yep. Which way around is it? Councillor Cook.
I wonder if it might be appropriate, perhaps in the July meeting or the September meeting, to look at the post-COVID recovery plan. By then, with any luck, we'll be onto the next stage of the roadmap, and we'll have some idea of where we're likely to be in the autumn time, and we might be able to see how regeneration and the post-COVID recovery can work together. I don't know whether July would be a good time. There's not a lot to be discussed then, or maybe wait until September when we'll have an idea of, tourist information, tourist numbers perhaps.
Yeah, Ben.
Again, happy to take that. Could I request that we push that back to September? I would like to have in the intermediate period both a couple of meaningful meetings with the Economic Recovery Steering Group, so that when we feed back, that's a reflection of the work that they've had the opportunity to reflect on that work before we bring it to overview and scrutiny. But yeah, happy to do that in September, and prepare a report for then.
Yeah, I just don't want to overload your workload too much, Ben. So thank you very much for that consideration.
That's all right. It gives me a bit of time off during the summer.
We all need that. We all need that.
Okay, that's good. Anything else on the work programme? No, pretty well covered. That's good. Well, what I would do is say, from my point of view as chairman, it's been a weird year, probably the same for the rest of you. We haven't actually seen each other. So it's been a strange old year, not had one like this before. Hopefully we won't have another one again. Thank you for your input into the meetings. Councillor Quartel, I know, is moving on to another committee. I'm looking at the agenda for the full council. So thank you for his input. And we'll welcome Sam Coleman. So thank you, and thanks to Councillor Cook for her support, and thank you all for your time. Thank you, Louise, for keeping us on the straight and narrow, and thanks to the tech team for keeping us going. So if that's that, I'll declare the meeting closed at 12 minutes past 8. Thank you very much.